Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us again. This is Renaissance Capital's 25th annual conference on Russia. Alexey Moiseev has been kind enough to join us again. He's been Deputy Finance Minister since 2012. But some years prior to that, he would have been running these sessions for RenCap. So we've got a long history with Alexey, and I'm just delighted that you can join us again on this session. The way we've structured this is we're going to try and do it by Q&A. I think everyone's fairly aware of Russia's fantastic fiscal position, incredibly low levels of debt. It's one of the safer credits in not just the emerging markets, but I'd argue globally, as a result of such good fiscal policy over such a long period of time. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to hand over to Sofya Donets, our economist, who's going to ask the sensible questions and get the conversation going. So Sofya, over to you.
Hi, Charlie, thank you. Hello, Alexey, it's so good to see you today with us. Thank you for joining us again. We know you have quite a tough schedule. So just to start, I have some thoughts about that. Like 5 years ago, we would start the discussion with the Minfin with like questions like where the fiscal balance would be, what the Minfin will do with excessive oil revenues given the growing oil prices, and what's about borrowing. But I think that given that fiscal rule is in place and given how transparent the Ministry of Finance is now, it became quite a boring questions. So probably it's given us a chance to focus on those questions that you are supervising for the Ministry of Finance, which are focused more on the development of the financial market, and that's so important for now. So probably just to start with quite a broad question, I would ask, what's the main trends that you see now in the financial market and financial industry of Russia that the Minfin would like to be long-term and to stay there, or some trends that you could you would prefer to be short-term? So what's things that you like and would support, and what's things that you don't like and probably would discourage? So what's your view?
Well, first of all, very glad to see you all, and it's unfortunate that I cannot see all participants. I'm sure I would have seen many familiar faces, but it is what it is, and it's my pleasure, and I'm honored to participate in probably the 20th RenCap conference in a row. I don't think I've missed a single one in those last 20 years. So it's a little jubilee for me as well in this respect. But to be more serious, of course, the main trend of Russia's financial markets this year is that finally we're seeing a large inflow of individual funds into the stock market. And stock market in broad sense, including shares and bonds and all other instruments of the financial market. And unfortunately, in some obscurely structured instruments as well. And that is, on the one hand, is something we wanted for all along, for an average Russian to actually come and invest in the financial markets and form a portfolio other than simply deposits in the bank. On the other hand, what we have seen is a massive effort by a number of Russian financial market organizations to sell high margin products to customers without caring much about explaining them the actual risks of those products. This is not a unique problem for Russia. This is a problem for many countries. This is why most countries have introduced the qualified and unqualified investor categorization. This is why people pass through various exams on what they can and cannot sell to clients. And this is why some people went to prison in some of very developed financial market jurisdictions. But what we are seeing, unfortunately, is that this is the first major try of average of Russian people en masse with the financial markets. They have been active all along, but numbers we've seen this year are tenfold what we've seen in previous times. So we see a massive new amount of accounts, a massive new amount of people. And it would be very unfortunate if people were to get burned by those structured instruments and then turn their backs to the financial markets. Because obviously, one of the main handicaps of Russian financial markets has always been, in my opinion, that the market was reliant only on institutional money, and that results in some high instability and results in shallow liquidity in certain sectors, and that's something we wanted to fix all along. Now, forced by changes in tax policy, that deposits are now being taxed the same way, or in some sense even the taxation is structured in favor of the financial markets as opposed to deposits. Plus, the interest rates have been very low in the deposit market. People started using financial markets, and that is the main positive news. In fact, the main news, but also a big challenge for the regulators to avoid and get rid of fraud in this market.
Great, thank you. That's indeed a very important trend. And the other thing that is quite trendy and which is in focus in our conference, actually, it was a panel yesterday, which was devoted to like ESG finance, decarbonization, and the development of, let's say, green finance. So I've just heard your interview on the green bonds and regulations for the green bonds. Can you please comment, how do you see the future of the green finance in Russia, and what should be done before we have, let's say, a boost in this industry?
Well, it's probably a little broader process than simply green financing, the way we treat it. Generally speaking, ESG, of course, as you know, is more than ecology is only one letter in this acronym, right? There are two more, and that also requires changes to corporate governance and a number of other things. And therefore, what I've been seeing on my plate is, of course, two things. One is, you already mentioned the green bonds, but second thing is the Ministry of Finance has now been made, about a year and a half ago, been made responsible for management of basically act as a shareholder for the state-owned companies. We, of course, need to implement a number of changes in how the state-owned companies have been run with respect to the ESG agenda. So it's easier for me to respond to the second part. Basically, what we're doing now, we're setting up ESG committees and subcommittees on the boards, and tasking them with development of the green strategy, or broader ESG strategy of the Russian state-owned companies. A number of them have already started doing this. Speaking of green bonds, the main problem that we're seeing now is, of course, the taxonomy. This taxonomy is broadly absent across the world, but it's particularly absent in Russia. The Ministry of Economy is now busily working to develop what is green bond, what is not green bond. There's a joke that painting wall in green color doesn't count for a green project, so that needs to be a little more elaborated on what we consider or don't consider as green bonds. But it's important to note that the trend we see now in the world is not only governments are willing to provide tax incentives to issue those bonds, but also investors are willing to accept lower interest rates on this kind of bonds. And that's exactly what we've seen, policy, which we've seen from a number of major international investors investing, among other companies, in Russian bonds of Russian companies as well. And therefore, we need to make sure that there is this general feel of need to pay for the future, so to say. Some bill today is shared across all parts. So people get smaller returns, investors get smaller returns, government gets less taxes, and so on. But this has to be a collective effort. But ultimately, the government currently is putting together a strategy, and of course, it will include certain incentives for green finance.
If I could jump in with a broader question, I really appreciate what you were saying about the growth in the retail interest in Russia, and it's something we've obviously been supporting for many, many years as well. And we think it does improve the transparency of the market of companies. It gives a bigger domestic lobby for better governance. So we're very positive on that. One thing on the other side we're getting is this talk of a tax on the steel companies and this pressure on companies to invest more, perhaps pay out less in dividends. I don't know how that tallies with retail investor interest and whether they might be disappointed if the companies they're investing in starts to get hit. I'm also conscious that in the UK, we've seen the government do a tax on oil companies during the oil price rise in 06, 07. I think there was a super tax on oil because of excess profits, windfall profits, I think they called it. So this does happen elsewhere. I'm just curious, where are we at? Because you're getting fantastic dividends in Russia, some of the best in the world. And that is an attractive thing for foreign investors to come into the market too. But the question is, to what extent, how far is the government going to go in terms of pressuring companies to reinvest more money, to pay out less in dividends? What's the thinking on this?
Well, let me first get away with the question of the steel companies. This is clearly, you correctly mentioned, this is windfall tax. What we've seen is due to great demand for steel in Russia, in particular, globally, but in Russia in particular, because of massive growth in residential construction and the growth of that market, they really received windfall profits, and some of that profits are being taken away. According to what we've seen today on the wires, that's only a fraction of new profits that they've, additional windfall profits that they've earned because of this major spike in prices. So I wouldn't really put much more into this. And I was present at that meeting. It doesn't look like policymakers in the cabinet are wanting to spread that to other companies or other sectors. So that's a very special thing, which is unlikely to be taken as a rule to other sectors. Speaking of dividends, what the government is unhappy about is basically part of the long story of relationships between the Russian state and people who have privatized assets which were built during the Soviet times. The issue is that in some of those cases, there are some cases which are the most notorious, is this a company which produces potash in Bashkortostan. I've not heard of it. Most people probably haven't, because it was held privately. But basically, now the state has to clean up major ecological damage in that region of Russia, and the company doesn't have anything on the books because virtually all cash was siphoned out into dividends and taken out of Russia, and basically it's now liability of the state to clean up major fields of potash development, which company doesn't have money to develop. Of course, there will be legal proceedings against those people, but it's unlikely that a lot of large amount of money will be recovered. So this huge ecological damage, which now goes, it's hard for me to say how costly it's going to be, how long it's going to take, but it's really huge. That is this kind of situations are exactly when we're looking at limiting dividends. To prove my words, I want to draw attention to a government order which was produced a week ago, which requires all state companies to pay 50% rather than 25% of dividends on the IFRS basis. And that is something we were working on for many years. It's, the Minister of Finance himself has been very active in promoting this initiative. And it was last week when it finally was supported and this decree was signed. So now, again, previously, a lot of companies paid 50%, but it was a long negotiating process with us as a shareholder, like with many other shareholders and the management. Now it's an official order that they have to pay 50%. So again, 50% of IFRS profits is not taken as excessive. Excessive is when a company basically pays out its capital in a couple of years, its dividends. That is considered as excessive. Again, the reason for that is when people think of it, they apply this to typical company which operates in the West, which is a company created by shareholders and created by people who invested in the first place and sold it later and so on. But this company where everybody is people who, broadly speaking, either build what's in there or interested in making it as keeping it as going concern. What we're talking about is a situation when people have privatized companies, so the assets can serve for another 10 or 15 years. They want to take out as much cash as possible and then drop it together with ecological damage and all other problems and say, okay, we've gotten all the cash out. Do with it what you want. And that's exactly the situations which we're trying to fight. And so that will only cover extreme cases. Again, if you want to see what's really how bad things really are, sometimes that just check on the internet this Bashkirian potash company. That's really dramatic ecological damage they made.
That's a very interesting point, and that is also reassuring about the new government order you mentioned last week. I had wondered whether I'm right or wrong to wonder if Russia might be encouraging companies to go the conglomerate route. That if perhaps they're in an industry where it's a mature industry, is the hope that companies will reinvest into new sectors, but rather than just give it out on dividends? Or you're saying there's no policy on that from?
No. Again, what I remember from my textbook is that companies should not diversify for their shareholders. Right. And that's why, as a head of the strategy committee on the board of Alrosa, for example, I've been always against from reinvesting some of that cash they've earned in recent years into gold or other synthetic diamonds or whatever else, because we better pay out. And as you know, Alrosa has been paying out 100% of free cash flow, which at some point was more than 100% of their net profits in a particular year. And in fact, last year they had to borrow some money to pay out 50% IFRS profits. So this company has a very good track record, and that is better, in my opinion, than investing that money into diversification and some other sectors. But the challenges with Russian companies, of course, are obvious, and that are investing in protection of environment, investing in local communities, investing in upgrading their technologies in digital technologies and so on. And that a lot of government, what we call it, directives, which are basically are guidelines on how representatives from boards should vote particular things, have gone into exactly that. That companies have to spend much more on digitalization, and companies have to spend much more on ecological, sorting out ecological things. So that's basically what's really is.
Okay, it's also interesting what you're saying about steel. Sorry, Sofya, I'm interrupting horribly. But the thing about steel being connected to the residential real estate construction, because that feels like this extension of the mortgage finance story, which I have thought for many years was an area that Russia could benefit from growth in. More mortgages, high real estate prices, an improvement in the quality of housing. But that's something which the government's promoting and has extended, right? Yes,
we currently have 4.5 mortgage. I'll explain why it's half mortgage. The stimulus programs. One of them is the one which was anti-crisis program, which was put in place in April of last year to support the industry, which was basically mortgage of 6.5% interest rate. That was extended by 12 months with a slight higher interest rate of 7%. And that is an indication that we want to exit the problem from that program. So this is not going to be extended forever. It's going to be, we will exit from that. But the other ones will continue to exist, I expect. The one is for families with 2 children or more, where they pay 6% and the rest is subsidized. Then there's a program for rural territories with 3% interest rate, and then for Far East with the 2% interest rates, and the rest being subsidized. Plus, we pay out a special cash payment of 450,000 rubles, which is about probably $7,000 for people who have mortgage and where a third or consecutive child was born. Because what we figured out is that people who have second or third child, they try to get away from the mortgage market. We find it. So we mainly try to subsidize that to extend our support to those people so that they can be part of the market. And in fact, it looks like that, and that program has been extended for families with where the first child was born. So the specific government policy support rural areas where mortgages are harder to get. Far East, where we almost see no residential construction, we're quite concerned about it, and because the residential stock needs to be upgraded there as well as in other places of the country. And of course, families with children, which have been unable to improve their living conditions because market mortgage was a little too expensive for them. So we're trying to pay for that as well.
Sofya, back to you. Sorry, too many interruptions.
Well, I guess that what we just heard is quite supportive for those who look at real estate, trust sector, or to banks, and also for the macro, in terms of a macro perspective. Probably a bit just back to your focus, one of your focuses of your coverage is like privatization program. I don't think that we're now in a position to talk about like any huge expectations about like privatization in Russia, but still, what's your update on your views on what's going to be, you consistently reiterate that this footprint of the state in the Russian economy should be reduced. So what's your update on the views of the strategy toward the state-owned companies? And in addition, what's about like other IPOs? What we could expect? I've heard about like measures which are discussed between the Ministry of Finance and the central bank about like supporting the IPOs. What's it's about? Thanks.
Well, yes, that's true that measures of tax support of IPOs were discussed in the meeting that the minister has held with the market. But at this stage, I cannot say that any of those measures have been negotiated enough to make it possible for me to announce those measures. This has been discussed. Quite honestly, I wouldn't be too optimistic there because we would rather extend the tax support of residential investors into other types of products, such as pension funds or insurance, life insurance, or things like this. And that's more of a focus for us, as opposed to incentivizing investors into IPOs. However, and again, I'm not going to tell you any name any deals because most of them are related to companies which are already in the market. It would be insider trading from my side. Extending insider information from my side. But let me just make one comment. Ever since the state property management this is responsibility of the Ministry of Finance, we have promoted an idea that is a it's not that we should prove that this or that company has to be sold, but the other way around. That those who are interested in keeping this or that company with the state have to prove that that has to be kept. So by default, everything has to be sold, and government is considering every particular case, however small this company can be, for it to be retained as a state-owned company. So our default condition is to sell everything, and that is supported by the cabinet, and that is something we're going to do. So I expect a significant extension of the privatization program of the next couple of years. However, you are unlikely to, let me be honest, you're unlikely to see major names which you expect to see for the government to go below 50%, or in fact to go below 75% or 100%. There's a number of companies which are thinking of where deals have been prepared, but again, before they announced, I cannot make any comments there.
I think we're going to be running very low on time now, and we don't want to take up too much of your time. I just want, it may not be your remit, but this issue of the IMF special drawing rights and the potential reallocation of countries' money, a country like Russia, which I think is getting 20 to 30 billion from the special drawing rights. Is there a chance of Russia reallocating to other countries, as France has been talking about, and I think China suggested it might as well?
Oh, Charlie, let me be honest with you, I don't know. That's something I have no knowledge of.
That's no problem at all. I'll keep asking. Yeah, anyway, that's great. Thank you very much. Alexey, thank you so much for your time. That was very, very interesting and very encouraging about the dividend story. So I really appreciate your thoughts and the efforts you're putting in to try and get the capital markets working as well as they can in Russia. It's great to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you. Bye.
Knowledge is information, but not all information turns into knowledge. Today, every company leaves digital footprints in hundreds of different sources. But this information by itself does not tell you who it is you're looking at and what the risks of doing business with them are. Businesses can't exist in a vacuum. They need employees, customers, partners, contractors, investors. Good counteragents help a company succeed, create products, make profit, expand business opportunities. But what about bad ones? 49% of organizations around the world say that they've been victims of fraud or economic crime. 2/3 of Russian companies say they've encountered economic crime in the past 2 years. This is significantly higher than the global average. Every year, 15% of companies simply disappear, whether on their own initiative or because they're forced to do so by tax bodies, often leaving unpaid debts. If you want to minimize your risk, you need to find and analyze every scrap of information you can, identifying, analyzing, collecting facts. Processing big data is impossible without qualified specialists, experience, time, expensive equipment, new technology, machine learning, graphs. Spark Interfax gathers information from all available sources and converts it into knowledge, allowing you to see the world of business in its entirety with all its risks and opportunities. And there's no doubt that tomorrow we'll be able to understand the world of business even better, thanks to the emerging digital economy, cutting-edge technology, and the availability of new information about the lives of companies. Knowledge decreases risks and creates trust, the foundation of any successful business.